Shocking. It wasn't thunder that woke her. It was the sound of someone softly weeping just outside her door. Elena froze on her straw mat, breath held. The blanket pressed to her chest as the wind clawed at the cracked shutters of her riverside salon. She listened, pulse pounding in her ears. The crying rose and fell like the river's own breath, low and mournful, seeping through the warped door. And nervous, she told herself it was just the wind playing tricks, but she knew this place too well. They all said the river here was not innocent. No one dared build too close anymore, except her. She had arrived in Obu waterside with nothing but 2 battered travel bags, a cracked hairdryer, and 5,000 naira that couldn't rent a stall in the city. Bitter. She had spat on the city's promise, leaving behind her roach-infested room, her boss's insults that branded her worthless, the boyfriend who ghosted her after 4 years. She scrubbed this abandoned shed by the river until her palms cracked and bled. She hung a handmade sign that read Elena's Crown and Glory, voice bright and hopeful as she called out to the villagers, "Come in, let me make you beautiful," but no one came. Sad, they avoided her door, crossing the road with averted eyes. At night, she'd chew dry seasoning cubes to trick her body into thinking it wasn't starving. She soaked Gary in cold river water and pretended it was ice cream. Even Mariam, her only friend, finally sat beside her and spoke gently. "Elena, please, leave this place. That building was abandoned for a reason." Elena's jaw tightened. "I don't care. No one tells me where I can dream." But tonight her voice was gone. That crying outside seemed to crawl under the walls, whispering her name. She forced herself across the creaking floor, each step heavier than the last. She pressed her ear to the door, silent.
Before continuing this exciting story, if this is touching something deep in you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, has anything like this ever happened in your own family? Let us continue.
She closed her eyes, breath catching in her throat. A sudden crack of thunder split the night. She stumbled back with a cry, hands over her ears. Outside, the rain fell like a drowning world, flooding every crevice. God, what have I done? She asked the dark room. 3 quiet, deliberate knocks echoed on the door. Elena's heart stopped. Elena's fingers trembled as she hovered over the latch. She could hear the rain roaring on the tin roof, the wind screaming like it wanted to peel the walls apart. The 3 knocks had stopped, but their echo filled the room like a ghost. Hazetan, whispering. "Who's there?" Silence. She wiped sweat from her brow, teeth chattering. She crossed herself 3 times, whispered a prayer her mother taught her long ago. Another knock, softer now, almost polite. Her heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. What kind of person knocked on a salon door in a forgotten community at midnight, in a storm? She peeked through the crack in the door, but all she saw was black water pooling at the doorstep. Swallowing hard, she unlatched it slowly, creaking. The door swung open. Standing there was a woman, barefoot and drenched, water dripping from long hair that clung to her shoulders like black vines. She seemed human, but there was something wrong about how still she was, how her eyes didn't blink. Elena's voice broke. "Good evening. What do you want?" "My name is Mara. I've come to help you." Elena stepped back. "Help me. It's midnight." Mara didn't answer. She just walked in and sat in the old cracked salon chair. Lightning flashed, illuminating the salon's peeling paint, the cheap mirrors fogged with damp. Elena's breath shook. Mara smiled faintly. "I've seen your tears, your hunger. I know your prayers. Let me make you rich." Elena felt her knees weaken. "Rich? You want braids? A weave?" Mara shook her head. "When the time comes, you'll know. Sell what I give you. Keep the money, but you must sell them." Elena's voice cracked. "I don't understand. Who are you?" Mara just stood and walked out. Elena followed her onto the flooded path. "Wait, who are you?" But Mara was already walking into the river. The water welcomed her like an old friend, swallowing her in ripples until all that remained was her long black hair sinking out of sight. Elena dropped to her knees in the mud, sobbing as the rain erased all trace of the woman. When Elena woke, she thought it had been a nightmare. But there it was, a black nylon bag sat on her doorstep, soaked from the night storm. She stared at it for long minutes, fear slithering in her gut. Anxious, she considered throwing it in the river. But hunger and curiosity clawed at her. With trembling fingers, she dragged it inside. She peeled it open. Inside were wigs, not the cheap synthetic ones she sold in the city. These were perfect, luxurious, bone straight, single donor, bouncy curls that felt like living hair. She gasped, "God, what is this?" Her hands shook as she lifted one, the strands catching the light like silk. But fear followed wonder. She slumped against the door, fighting tears. What will I tell Mariam? How do I explain this? God, what have I done? A sudden knock made her scream. Her heart leapt to her throat. But it wasn't Mara. This time it was a young woman in jeans and a bright blouse, tapping on her phone. "Hi, are you the hairdresser here? I saw your salon on Instagram." Elena blinked. "Instagram? I'm not on Instagram." But before she could say more, 2 more women arrived. Then 3. Then 5. By 9 a.m., a line was forming outside her ramshackle salon. Women from other towns, office workers saying they felt compelled to leave early and come here. The strangest part was none of them could explain how they found out about her. Elena's hunger screamed at her. Her debts weighed on her like an anchor. She made a choice. She smiled. "Come in, please." That day, she braided hair until her fingers cramped and bled. She sold 5 of Mara's wigs for prices she'd only dreamed of. By dusk, she counted over 900,000 naira. She sat on the floor, money fanned around her, mouth hanging open. Is this a dream or a trap? Outside, the river roared quietly, as if listening. Elena didn't sleep that night. The black bags were stacked in the corner, like dark creatures waiting for her to make a choice. Outside, the rain pounded the roof in a relentless rhythm, rattling the loose tin like bones. She sat on the floor with her knees pulled tight, eyes locked on the bags. How many had she sold now? She'd stopped counting. Images of customers flashed through her mind. A shy girl who danced and filmed herself outside her door. A woman who stared at the mirror and burst into tears. "I feel so powerful," that woman had said. Elena felt her throat tighten. She should have felt proud, but all she felt was sick. Money littered her counter. Enough to feed her for years, enough to pay debts that had haunted her dreams. She pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw sparks of light, but she couldn't shut out the whispers in her head. Voices, dark water, long hair sliding across her skin in dreams. She jolted awake before dawn, gasping. The rain had stopped, leaving the world wet and silent. She wiped sweat from her face, breathing in ragged sobs. Then she heard it, soft tapping, a gentle knock. She crept to the door and opened it slowly. Outside sat another black bag. Dry despite the storm. She swallowed a scream. She bent and picked it up, fingers shaking. She dragged it inside and dropped it with a dull thud. "Stop, please, stop." But she opened it. Inside were more wigs, flawless, seductive, promising wealth and salvation. She slammed the bag shut and crawled away on all fours until she hit the wall. God help me. That day she forced herself to open the shop. Women were waiting, lined up like supplicants at a shrine. She smiled through her tears. And she braided their hair, her fingers blistered and raw. She sold the wigs. She watched them leave laughing, singing her praises. But that night when she lay down, she heard the river sigh against its banks like it was breathing her name. Mama Tayo watched it all. She sat behind her small puff-puff stand every day, eyes narrowed, Bible balanced on her knee. She was old, her skin folded like carefully ironed cloth, but her gaze was sharp as a knife. People called her the village prophetess, though she laughed when they did. She noticed the changes before anyone else, suspicious lines of women outside Elena's door, their 2 bright smiles as they left, the whispers of miracles, and those wigs, too perfect, too alive. She tugged on the rope tied to her goats, Obi and Dara, but they refused to go near the salon. They brayed and danced sideways, eyes rolling in terror. Mama Tayo frowned. Grime, animals see what we pretend isn't there. That night, Mama Tayo dreamed. She saw Elena braiding shadows, figures with black, dripping hair that slithered like serpents around her arms. The mirror reflected only dark, bottomless water. She woke before dawn with her heart pounding, sweat slick on her forehead. She clutched her Bible, whispering psalms through trembling lips. By first light, she was walking toward Elena's door. Elena was sweeping the porch, eyes sunken, smile brittle as old paint. Mama Tayo didn't waste time. My child, I don't know what spirit gave you this gift, but listen, when God gives, it's slow, but when the water gives, it drowns you first before it takes your feet. Elena's smile didn't reach her eyes. Business is good, Mama, finally. Mama Tayo shook her head slowly. Good shouldn't make your hands tremble. Elena glanced down. Her fingers were white on the broom handle, knuckles straining. Thank you for your concern. I have work to do, Mama Tayo sighed, turning away. May God open your eyes before it's too late. Inside, Elena dropped the broom. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stared at them until tears blurred her vision, the black bags waiting quietly behind her like obedient pets. The rain fell in relentless sheets that night, hammering Elena's thin tin roof like angry fists. Inside, the lantern flickered with every gust of wind that whined through the gaps in the walls. Elena sat on the dirt floor, knees drawn to her chest, arms hugging them so tightly her bones ached. She rocked slightly, eyes fixed on the corner of the room. The black bags were stacked there in a neat pile. Too neat. They seemed to breathe with the room. They seemed to wait. She pressed her face into her knees to muffle her sobs. Her mouth was dry, tongue thick with the taste of fear. She heard the wind rattling the shutter so hard it seemed the whole place would come apart. I'm done. I won't sell them anymore. Her voice cracked, brittle as eggshell. She lifted her head and stared at the bags. They didn't move, but she felt mocked all the same. Hurt, angry as safe can verlust. Hurt with the like the mounds. They didn't move, but she felt mocked all the same. She thought of the women who had left her salon beaming. Their praise still rang in her ears. You're an angel, Elena. You're changing lives. But at night she saw them in dreams, shadows, figures with wet hair clinging to their faces, eyes blank, mouths whispering in a language she couldn't understand. They sat in her salon chairs in the dark, hair growing, writhing like snakes around her arms. She shuddered and clamped her hands over her ears. But even that couldn't shut out the river's voice. It was whispering to her through the walls, soothing, promising, demanding. She crawled to the golden box sitting by the door. She hadn't touched it since Mara left it there, but it still glowed faintly, pulsing with soft, unholy light. Elena stared at it, tears falling freely. Leave me alone. She lunged at it suddenly, knocking it over. It flew open. Inside, wigs shimmered in the lantern light, strands dancing like trapped flames. One glowed with purple fire at its tips. Another seemed to be woven from fog. Elena's breath hitched. She scrambled back, hitting the wall, palms spread to stop herself. Thoughtful, horrified, she couldn't take her eyes off them. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. God, please help me. But no help came. Outside, the wind fell silent for a single moment, and in that silence she heard 3 deliberate knocks on her door. The knocking was soft, measured, polished, eerie, almost polite. Elena's entire body went rigid. She sat pressed against the wall, panting, watching the door as if it might open on its own. The lantern guttered, throwing flickering shadows across the walls. Each shadow seemed to reach for her. She forced herself to crawl forward, fingers digging into the dirt floor. Her breath sounded too loud in the cramped space. She paused just short of the door, one from blades trembling. Who's there? Silence. The wind roared again outside, but the knocking didn't return. She waited, eyes wide, heart thundering in her chest. She remembered Mara's cold eyes, that calm, unsettling voice. Haunted, remembering, sell them. She clamped her hands over her ears, rocking. I don't want this anymore. But the door trembled under another knock, 3 slow raps. Deliberate, Elena screamed. She scrambled to her feet. Grabbing the lantern, she wrenched the door open so hard it nearly tore off the hinge. The wind exploded into the room, slamming the bags against the far wall. She squinted through the torrent. At first there was no one, but then she saw her, Mara, standing in the mud, barefoot, soaked, her long hair plastered to her face, hiding her eyes. Elena lifted the lantern higher, arms shaking. Get out! Go away! Mara didn't move. She slowly raised her head, revealing an expression that was too calm, too ancient. Do you like what you have become? Elena's mouth worked soundlessly. She couldn't speak. Her throat felt glued shut. I'm rich. Isn't that what you wanted? Mara took a step forward. The mud didn't even seem to touch her feet. She lifted a golden box and set it gently on the threshold. "These are special wigs. For those who want sudden changes, sell them." Elena shook her head violently. "I don't want them. Take them back." Mara tilted her head, water dripping from her hair. "Then reject the gift, but if you do, the river will take more than this." Thunder boomed so close it shook the walls. Elena blinked. Mara was gone. The storm screamed around her. The golden box sat in the doorway, gleaming, glowing faintly, mocking. The wigs inside seemed to breathe. Elena sank to her knees, sobbing as the wind howled like laughter. And in the dark the river surged higher, lapping at her doorstep like it wanted in. Elena didn't sleep. She sat in the corner, knees pulled up, eyes red and swollen from crying. Outside, the storm raged like something alive, battering the walls with wet fists. Wary, haunted, inside, the golden box sat in the center of the room, glowing dully in the lantern light. It seemed to watch her. She wiped her face with shaking fingers. "Why won't you leave me alone?" No answer came. Only the wind howling through the cracks, whispering her name in mocking tones. She pushed herself up slowly, limbs stiff and sore. Her eyes never left the box. It looked beautiful, precious, deadly. She staggered forward and snapped it shut. The glow faded, but the whisper of power remained. She shoved it under the counter, covered it with old rags, but she could still feel it pulsing, alive, waiting. She tried to clean the salon, to make it look normal. She swept the floor with angry strokes, the bristles scratching over the dirt. But every corner felt darker, heavier. She heard the river outside, murmuring like it was laughing at her. She clamped her hands over her ears. "Shut up! Shut up!" But it wouldn't. When dawn broke, the rain eased to a light drizzle. The river was swollen, muddy, restless. Elena opened her door. There was already a line. Women in bright wrappers, office workers in skirts and heels, eyes bright, desperate. She forced a smile onto her cracked lips. "Come in." They poured inside. She worked until her fingers bled, braiding, twisting, selling the wigs. They laughed. They cried with joy. "Thank you, Elena. You're saving me." She nodded silently, ignoring the way her stomach twisted. She collected the money, her fingers shaking. At night she counted it. It was enough to pay all her debts, enough to buy a new house, enough to never be hungry again, but she couldn't stop crying. She fell asleep at the counter, head resting on stacks of bills, tears soaking them, and in her dreams she saw Mara, standing waist-deep in the river. Her hair spread around her like ink. Sell them, or drown. Elena jolted awake, heart pounding. She looked around wildly, but she was alone. The lantern guttered weakly, casting long, hungry shadows, and in the corner, under the rags, the golden box pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Elena barely recognized her own reflection anymore. She sat in front of the cracked mirror, hands trembling as she tried to braid her own hair. Her fingers wouldn't obey. They trembled. They ached from days of non-stop work. Her nails were cracked, caked with hair wax and blood from tiny cuts. She dropped her comb. It clattered onto the dirt floor. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she pressed her palms to her face. Weary, broken. She tried to breathe slowly, calmly, but the whispers wouldn't stop. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the black bags stacked in the corner, from the golden box shoved under rags. She couldn't shut them out. Haunted, they sounded like water rushing over rocks, like Mara's soft voice promising everything she had ever wanted. Her phone buzzed violently on the counter. She jumped. She snatched it up with shaking hands. Hundreds of messages, desperate, demanding. "Please, I'll pay double. My sister needs it. God sent me to you." Elena's vision blurred with tears. "Stop. Please, just stop." But they wouldn't. She tossed the phone aside and staggered to the door. She flung it open. Outside, the line was already forming in the early morning fog. Women in bright headscarves, men standing behind them with wallets out, their eyes locked onto the salon, onto her. They looked at her like she was salvation itself. She wanted to slam the door in their faces, but her stomach growled. Her mind screamed about debt, about rent, about hunger. She felt her shoulders slump. She wiped her face. "Come in." They flooded in, filling every corner. Her fingers moved on autopilot, braiding, selling, smiling, collecting money. They cried in gratitude, blessed her, called her a miracle, but when she looked at them she didn't see their faces. She saw black water bubbling around them, hair moving on its own, eyes empty as the river. She swallowed the bile in her throat. By nightfall, the money was stacked in tall towers on her counter. She sat in front of them, head in her hands. The salon was quiet, too quiet. Outside, the river lapped gently at the muddy banks, like it was laughing at her. And in the shadows behind her, the golden box shifted ever so slightly, like it was breathing. Elena couldn't remember the last time she slept properly. She sat slumped in her chair, eyelids heavy, head jerking back every time she started to nod off. The lantern cast soft orange light across the salon, making the money stacks look like little golden towers. She hated looking at them. But she couldn't look away. It was her prison, her blessing, her curse. She wiped her face, skin raw from tears she barely noticed anymore. She thought of Nancy Blue, the influencer with the wide smile and perfect makeup, the one who bought the special wig, the one found dead in her luxury apartment, lungs full of water, no sign of forced entry. Elena gagged, hand covering her mouth. She remembered the way Nancy laughed in her chair. How much? I don't care. Just give it to me. Elena had handed it over with trembling hands. She wanted to blame Nancy, but she couldn't. She sold it. She chose. Her phone buzzed on the table, making her jump. She snatched it up with shaking fingers. More orders, more pleading. I want the same wig Nancy wore. I don't care how much. She threw the phone. It hit the wall and fell with a pathetic clatter. She pressed her palms over her ears as if that would stop the voices. But they were inside her head now, whispers in a language older than the river itself. She stumbled to the corner where the golden box waited, covered in rags, but glowing softly underneath. She could almost hear it breathing. She yanked the rags away, stared at the shimmering wigs inside. Each strand seemed alive, some burned with faint colours, others shifted like fog. Elena fell to her knees, crying, whispering, "Please, just let me go." But the room didn't answer, only the river outside, murmuring softly, promising, threatening. She stayed there all night, rocking on her heels, money all around her, her own private hell. And just before dawn, she heard the slow scrape of the door opening on its own. The door creaked open, letting in the cold pre-dawn air. Elena's head jerked up, her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't see anyone. But the wind shifted around her, circling like a curious animal. She pushed herself to her feet, knees cracking. Her hands went to the door. She slammed it shut and bolted it, pressing her forehead against the warped wood, shaking, whispering, "Stay out." But she knew it wouldn't. She turned back toward the room. The golden box sat open now, wigs spilling over the edges like a living thing. She felt sick. She stumbled to the back room sink and vomited bile, dry heaving until she was sobbing. She rinsed her mouth with river water she'd fetched that morning, spitting it out immediately. It tasted wrong, dirty, hungry. She stared into the small mirror above the sink. Her own eyes stared back, bloodshot, red-rimmed, haunted, disbelieving. They looked wet. She blinked. It was gone. Just her. But not really. She splashed her face and walked back into the main room. Her staff would arrive soon. They'd see the money, the bags. She couldn't let that happen. She started stuffing the money into bags. It spilled onto the floor, notes fluttering like dead leaves. She didn't care. She ran to the corner, gathered the black bags, shoved them into the back room. She tried to close the door, but the golden box was in the way. It wouldn't move. She kicked it, screamed at it. It didn't budge. The wigs inside shimmered in the lantern light, strands moving like they were breathing. Her breath came in ragged sobs. She fell to her knees, beating her fists on the dirt. Why me? Outside, the river answered with a gentle lapping, soft as a lullaby. She shut her eyes tight, but the sound of water was in her head now, in her veins, and in that moment she realized she could hear Mara whispering behind her. Elena froze. She didn't dare turn around. She could feel Mara's breath on her neck, cold, smelling of mud and river weeds. Leave me alone, but Mara's voice was inside her head, soft, patient. You're one of us now. Elena clamped her hands over her ears. She rocked back and forth, weeping. I'm not like you, but Mara's voice wrapped around her, dripping like water through cracks. You sell them. You take the money. You feed the river. Elena shook her head violently, hair whipping her face. She crawled forward, dragging herself toward the door. She clawed at the wood, nails breaking. Please, I'll stop selling them. The room fell silent, so quiet she could hear her own heart slamming in her ribs. Then she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. Laughter. Mara's laughter. Low, echoing, mocking. She turned slowly. The salon was empty, but the golden box was wide open. All the wigs inside glowed. They shimmered. They breathed. She saw visions in them. Women smiling, weeping, drowning, the river swelling to swallow her entire salon. She squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, the box was normal again, just wigs, beautiful, deadly. She crawled toward it, reaching out a shaking hand. She touched one. It felt warm, alive. She yanked her hand back, panting. Her phone buzzed behind her. She didn't want to look, but she did. Hundreds of messages, orders, pleading, promising anything. She let out a guttural scream and flung the phone across the room. It shattered, but the messages kept coming in her head, demanding, hungry. Outside, the river lapped at the banks, almost purring. And at her door, 3 soft knocks came once more. Elena didn't answer the door this time. She sat in the middle of the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, rocking back and forth as the knocks continued. Haunted. They were slow, polite, mocking. Each one sent a jolt through her bones. She tried to hum over them, an old church hymn her mother taught her, but it came out ragged, broken. Please leave me alone. Outside, the river murmured in its muddy bed. She felt it in her veins. It didn't need permission to come in. She squeezed her eyes shut. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw Mara, standing waist-deep in the river, hair floating around her like black ink. Her mouth moved slowly, forming words Elena couldn't understand. Elena pressed her palms harder against her face. I don't want this. I don't want any of it. But the room was too quiet, so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She peeked through her fingers. The golden box sat on the counter, somehow closer than before. It gleamed dully in the lantern light. Its latch clicked open. Elena flinched. Strands of hair slid out slowly, like snakes testing the air. She gagged, bile rising in her throat. Get out! Get out! She scrambled to her feet, grabbed a broom, and swung at the box. The wigs recoiled slightly, then settled back with a soft rustle. Defiant, alive, her breath came in sobs. She backed away until she hit the wall. She slid down to the floor, knees to her chest, rocking. Outside, the knocks had stopped, but the river sang louder. It sounded like laughter. Her phone buzzed somewhere in the room. She didn't move to get it. She just sat there, listening to the river, feeling it press against her walls, and in the silence between heartbeats, she heard Mara's voice inside her head. Open the door. Elena's body shook as she squeezed her eyes shut tighter. She shook her head violently. No, no, but the voice didn't stop. Mara was in her mind now, gentle as poison. Open it. Let them in. Elena's mouth trembled. She forced herself to crawl toward the door on raw knees. Every muscle screamed. She reached for the bolt, hesitated. Her fingers trembled above it. She could hear breathing on the other side. Not just one person, many. She felt their hunger, their desperation, their faith in her. They think I'm saving them, but she wasn't. She was feeding them to something old and wet and cruel. She yanked her hand back. No! She scrambled backward, bumping into the counter. The golden box fell to the floor with a thud. Its contents spilled out. The wig spread across the dirt, strands moving like worms in the light. Elena screamed. She scrambled to her feet, backing away until her shoulders hit the wall. She couldn't take her eyes off them. They were beautiful, perfect, deadly. She heard them whispering, promising everything. Money, power, respect, salvation. She clamped her hands over her ears. But she still heard them. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the river was filling it inch by inch. Her breath came in wet gasps. She fell to her knees, sobbing. I can't do this anymore. But the door rattled behind her. Soft knocks, insistent, patient. She turned slowly, her shadow stretched toward the door like it wanted to open it for her. Outside, the wind died down, the rain stopped. The river went silent, holding its breath, and then Mara's voice filled the room, cold and clear, Choose. Elena sat frozen, breath ragged, heart slamming painfully against her ribs. The word hung in the air like a knife, commanding. Choose. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't want to. The river outside roared to life, pounding against the banks like it was furious. Water sloshed against the door, seeping in through the cracks, cold, dirty, alive. Elena whimpered as it pooled around her feet. She scrambled onto the counter, hugging her knees. She looked down. The wigs floated in the shallow water, bobbing gently, their strands spreading out like seaweed. They turned slowly, all of them facing her, waiting. She pressed her hands to her ears, rocking. Stop it! Stop it! But Mara's voice was everywhere, inside her skull, outside in the wind. Sell them, feed the river, or drown. Elena sobbed. She saw visions flashing behind her eyelids, women laughing in her chairs, counting money. Their smiles splitting, water pouring from their mouths. Children wearing wigs that slithered onto their faces, drowning them. She screamed until her throat felt raw. She lunged for the door, hands fumbling with the bolt. She flung it open. The river surged forward, flooding the room in a cold wave. She fell back, gasping. The golden box floated toward her on the water, spinning slowly. It bumped against her knee. The latch clicked open. Inside, the wigs shone like treasure, like promise, like death. Elena reached out a shaking hand, paused. Her tears fell onto the water, rippling. I don't want to die. Mara's voice purred in her mind. Then, sell. Elena's hand closed around the nearest wig. She held it to her chest, eyes hollow, mouth trembling. Outside, the river pulled back quietly, like it was smiling. If this heart-touching story moved you, don't let it be the last. Like, share and subscribe to my channel and keep the emotions flowing.